Wait a minute, you promised a Tugs video next week, and this isn't a Tugs video. Okay guys, I'm sorry about that. The Tugs video is taking a little longer to produce than I bargained for, so that will be coming out next week instead. For today, however, I have something equally fun planned. A little while ago, I asked you guys for headcanons you have about Thomas and Friends, and today, we're going to be delving into some of the best, and some of the strangest. Thank you to everyone who did submit a headcanon, it was a great help. Please subscribe to boost my ego, and let's talk about fan theories. Well, I don't see any point waiting around. Our first headcanon comes from STTE Studios. Steven, introduced in the 2013 movie King of the Railway, is a very popular character among fans. However, STTE reckons he isn't actually the famous Stephenson's rocket, but rather a replica. This actually makes a lot of sense, because the real rocket would never be sent to work on Sodor, it just belongs in a museum as a relic of the past. I actually think this could lead to a really interesting story about Steven doubting his heritage, and maybe even going through an identity crisis of some sort, about being just one of many rocket replicas. If anyone wants to make that an adaptation, I'd really like to see your attempt. Olymus is up next, with the very understandable theory that Diesel 10 was created illegally. This would explain the presence of Pinchy, his giant mechanical claw, which reasonably wouldn't be fitted to a diesel locomotive within the law. Now, you might be thinking that although those are great headcanons, neither of those theories are actually that strange. Well, here's one that really is. Vomunism suggests that the mine in Toby's discovery is a really messed up place. Bertram is the only engine left there who is brave enough to scare away the ghosts. But it gets weirder than that. The signalman that gave Toby directions to the mine isn't real at all. He's just a figment, guiding engines to a twisted part of the island. Perhaps the mine is where Smudger, as a generator, met his ultimate fate. Or perhaps there's something else going on. But whatever it isn't natural. On a slightly lighter note, one I really liked despite being a very small headcanon is from Christopher Allen. He says that Puffer from Tugs, Tom's sister show, is actually owned by a relative of Sir Topham Hatt, who keeps in contact with Topham very regularly. That's a nice one. Time for one of mine, I think. You know Derek, that Season 5 character who got a brief cameo in Calling All Engines, but other than that basically never appeared again? Well, I think the reason for that is that he was actually sent away from Sodor, but not in the way you might think. I think that the Fat Controller, when he saw how kind Derek was compared to the other diesels, decided to send him to the other railway to convince the other diesels that steam engines weren't actually that awful. Kind of like a missionary for Sodor. Who knows, maybe Boca went with him. Superly Nate thinks that after the events of Donald's Duck, Donald's crew kept a bag of duck feed in his cab. In the spring and summer, when the birds migrate north, Dilly, that's the duck by the way, would always stop for some food. This continued to Dilly's offspring as well, many years later. I don't know why, I just like this one, I think it's really charming. Back to another very strange but very cool one. Harold has thought up a really interesting and slightly morbid story for the origin of George's anti-railway prejudice. The reason George hates railways in Harold's headcanon is because George's girlfriend, a red steamroller named Janet, tragically died in a train crash and he's never trusted engines since. Now that's pretty crazy. Personally, I think George's hatred of railways is fine without an explanation, but it's still a really cool headcanon. Now the next one is a pretty meta headcanon. It really changes the way you view a lot of the show. Zack Attack says that the Skarloey and Renes of the hit era aren't actually the two engines that they're named after. Instead, they're two engines built to represent them, while the actual Skarloey and Renes were away for overhauls. To be honest, I think it is just kind of easier to say that their hit-era episodes aren't canon, but I think this is a cool idea nonetheless. Either that, or they could be acting for the TV show, and don't particularly like the characters that they've been given. Now, here's a really interesting one, provided by, and forgive me if I screw up pronunciation here, Noriaki Kakioin. This one says that Percy has some kind of mental disability, and I think this one makes a lot of sense. Not only that, but I think it probably gets worse over time. We see Percy struggle with words as early as Season 2, but they're always quite complex, and it's maybe understandable that he'd get them muddled up. I don't know many people who know what a deputation is, after all. But when we get to the end of the model era, and he doesn't know what restoration or even a magician is, you can see a problem has really been developing over time there. One of my personal favourites today is from Dreamy, and that's that James isn't actually that vain. I think I'll quote from their comment, since they put it best. James isn't actually so vain. I think that he acts confident to trick himself into believing it. His red paint is a symbol of being unique, which explains why he got so upset about Rosie being red. And also, he doesn't hate pulling trucks because they're not passengers, but he's afraid of them because of his first accident with them, making him not want to pull them. I think James is actually quite sad inside, and just wants to feel special and wanted. Wow man, that's pretty deep. However, I think this isn't so much a headcanon as a fact. Ultimately, the reason James went along with Gordon's plots in the earlier books, the most notable incident being when they went on strike, was because he was so humiliated by the turntable incident. He's very insecure about his image and how he looks, and ultimately, that's what spirals him into the vain and pompous character most of us see post-season 1. But of course, the best canon here really belongs to NWR Breakvan, who says, Thomas doesn't come to Sodor and everyone dies. The end. I must say, subscribing to this headcanon clears up a lot of timeline issues. There's one last headcanon I want to show, belonging to Oh Heck. Again, this is one that's very difficult to paraphrase, so I'm just going to quote it in its entirety from his comment. This is genuinely one of the best headcanons I've ever heard. It's just so well constructed. Here goes. Oh Heck says, I've said this before elsewhere, but this is my headcanon for Stepney in the TVS canon. A sharp-eyed viewer will notice that in the TV series, the manager of the Mid-Sodor Railway and the managers of Stepney's line are portrayed by the same figurine. In my headcanon, these two are the same man, and this man was not qualified to run a railway at all. After the Mid-Sodor Railway failed, the man decided to try again, reopening a portion of the line to the abandoned city of Great Waterton with the intention of operating tourist trains there. Instead of getting an engine himself, however, he allowed Rusty to gallivant off to Vicarstown to get one. The engine that Rusty found was actually Stepney, an ex-London, Brighton and South Coast Railway, Class A1X, who had been sold for scrap by British Railways. After arrangements were made, Stepney was back in service on his very own branch line, which became known as the Bluebell Railway, due to the many bluebells that grew alongside the line, although that wasn't the line's official name. Cue the events of Season 4 adaptations of the stories from Stepney the Bluebell engine, and the events of Stepney Gets Lost in Season 5. However, as I said, the ex-Mid-Sodor Railway manager absolutely sucked at running a railway, and so Stepney's line was closed and abandoned once more. Fortunately, the Fat Controller gave Stepney a home on the North Western Railway. Thus, why he runs a loop line with Edward in the Season 6 episode Edward the Very Useful Engine. One day, the members of the Bluebell Railway Preservation Society visited Sodor, and Stepney gave them a tour. He was surprised to learn that the Bluebell Railway used the very same tracks that he had worked on during his days on the Southern Railway. He grew nostalgic for the line, and the bluebells which grew alongside. As much as he loved Sodor, Stepney wanted to return to his old home. And so it was. Arrangements were made, and with great fanfare, Stepney departed for his new home in Sussex. As for the line Stepney once ran on, it and the city of Great Waterton were discovered by Thomas when he tried to find a shortcut to the wharf. Stepney occasionally returns to Sodor to visit, where he can usually be found running his old line. During one such visit, he got covered in pink sugar from one of Rosie's runaway trucks. Not the best note to end on, I know. It's not my fault that that was his last appearance. So that's my headcanon for Stepney in the TV series. I know it isn't accurate to the history of the real Stepney. Trying to make Stepney's TV series backstory make sense with the history of the real-life Stepney is very much impossible. Still, I do feel that I managed to explain Stepney's TV series appearances, while still having his home be the real-life Bluebell Railway at the end of the day. Like, wow. Stepney, along with Daisy, is one classic character that I feel the TV series really didn't do justice, but this fixes nearly all the problems I have with him. Well done, sir, you have my respect. Thank you so much again to everyone who submitted headcanons. Even if yours wasn't featured in the video, I did still heart some comments that I really enjoyed. If you want to head to my community tab, you can read everyone's headcanons, and there are well over 300. If you want to see a part 2 to this video, then hit the like button. If this video gets an ambitious 2,000 likes, I will make another. This has been the Thomas Cynic, and until the next time, have a good one.